We are here today to remember, I'll say it, a musical legend. A legend who pushed the boundaries of, I won't even just say rap music, I'd say just music in general. Who created some of the greatest songs of all time. A guy who's easily in my top 5 favorite artists of all time. And yes, I will still put him at that spot still. You know, but it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see the downfall of none other than Kanye West. Instead of spending, however long this video is going to be, talking about why what he's saying is wrong, because I shouldn't have to tell you that it's wrong, I'd much rather would like to honor the person that he was. I would at least like to remember, go down memory lane and just remember like what we had, because what we had was just, it was amazing. So where do we begin? I haven't even figured out the structure, I guess, for this whole thing, but so I guess we'll start all the way back in 2004 when an unknown guy by the name of Kanye West came out and released a album that was very different for the time being. I was just a wee lad when that album came out, The College Dropout, of course. To this day, it still holds up as a phenomenal album. I mean, it's a really long album, yes, but it's still, there's still some great songs. My favorite song in particular would go to none other than Slow Jams, featuring Twista and of course Jamie Foxx. It fits for the time period in which the song did come out, but to this day it's still quite a sexy song, and I think to this day you still gotta give props to Jamie Foxx for what he did on the song. It's great. Twista, even him rapping very fast, is very great. And then of course there's Kanye, who's amazing on here, and to this day he still has one of the funniest lines.
Got a light-skinned friend, look like Michael Jackson. Got a dark-skinned friend, look like Michael Jackson. Amazing
Poetry right there. You followed up a year later with Late Registration. College Dropout to me had a lot more bangers, I'd say, on here. Still had some moments of like being pretty chill and relaxed. I feel like Late Registration is just very chill kind of music, even though there are some bangers on there, of course, like Gold Digger. My favorite track off here, I mean, it does have to go to We Major. So much of this album feels almost as if it is a celebration, and this is just one of those songs that just it makes you feel like, holy shit, we made it. I mean, the horns in particular is what sells this track. Really Doe and Nas on here. And by the way, that clip of Nas recently where he was performing and he accepted a fan's request of performing We Major was just, it was great to see that. And of course my favorite part is when the instrumental cuts and then Kanye just comes back and just says, "Can I talk my shit again?" And just overall, I mean, like the trilogy, the trilogy, the original trilogy, not the Vultures trilogy. Like this was something, especially when you get into Graduation. And out of the whole trilogy, to me, Graduation is my favorite. It's such a damn near flawless album, and yet it has such a bad song with Drunken Hot Girls on here. I mean, that whole, I'd say like 6-track run from Good Morning to Champion to Stronger to I Wonder to Good Life, Can't Tell Me Nothing. It's flawless. We don't even gotta go through like the countless hits that are on this album. I mean, whether that would be, like I said, Stronger, Can't Tell Me Nothing, or Flashing Lights. I don't even gotta talk about Homecoming. And of course, I mean, like I gotta give my favorite song to none other than Good Morning. Good Morning is such a great intro. I really don't gotta talk about it. It's just that great. At this point in time, after these 3 albums, it was like he was untouchable. There was, and still, even after that, I would argue he was artistically untouchable. And I want to make it clear too, because this is very prevalent after graduation, is that like there was a lot of controversy that did happen. And now I'm gonna be honest, I'm not gonna be going into all that because quite frankly you already know what happened. But after that, you know, comes a very pivotal, I think, kind of album for a lot of the music that we do here today. A very experimental album for the time, and a very polarizing album for the time, being none other than 808s and Heartbreak. I think I might as well just say it. I think this is my favorite solo Kanye West album. I believe I may have mentioned it when Chromacopia came out, but one of my favorite things that artists do is when they show a lot more of their human side, and they get a little deeper into like who they are and how they're feeling. Obviously Kendrick did that with Mr. Morale. You know, at the time he had his fiance had left him, and he was also dealing with the death of his mother, which I feel like was the beginning of, you know, kind of when all like all this stuff that you know about the drama for Kanye West kind of started. And I think for like one of the big problems that people do have with this album, I think, is like a lot of the production that people do have a problem with this album, and obviously the use of autotune. I think those were the big complaints. I love the production on here. I love how big and bassy I feel like a lot of these songs kind of feel, whether if that would be or even kind of distorted in a way, especially with the autotune as well. But to me, there's one track on here. This is the reason why I haven't bought this album on vinyl, is because I don't believe this song is on vinyl. The final track on this album is, I think, probably his most emotional and one of his greatest songs that I think he's ever made. And really, you got to give a shout out to Beyonce, because she apparently convinced him to drop it because he wasn't really feeling it. And that's none other than Pinocchio Story, which obviously it's a freestyle from Singapore. The reason why this song is so great is just how, and it's such a phenomenal closer to the album as well. It's just the pure emotion of it being a freestyle, and you can hear it in his voice, and yet it's to me, this song is just a giant cry for help, and he's crying out to all these fans, and yet it's all just like them responding with, "Oh my gosh, we love you, Kanye," you know, all that typical kind of shit that you would hear at a concert, you know. And it's heartbreaking, you know, no pun intended. And then after 808s, there was a bunch of backlash for just stuff that he did. It eventually spawned what a lot of people consider to be one of the greatest albums ever made, and that'd be none other than My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which might get some flack for this, but I don't really think this album is as amazing as people make it out to be. The biggest issue that I kind of have with the project is how dated it feels, and I feel like part of that is a little bit of the production. A track like Gorgeous, I'm just not a fan of. I'm not a fan of the guitar kind of being the blueprint for the melody. I really don't like it when instrumentals do that. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. And then of course there's something like I can never remember the name of the song because I really don't like it, but it's the song where he does the whole Iron Man interpolation. You can't deny just the hits that are on this song. And it's ironic because this being one of my least favorite Kanye West projects, I still return to a lot more songs on this album than I do a lot of other ones, whether that would be Power or All of the Lights or even Devil in a New Dress. And as far as just like my favorite song in the album goes, it has to go to Dark Fantasy. Dark Fantasy is such an amazing intro, and it helps the album feel as grand as the album does sound. Biggest flaw that I feel like this track kind of has, I don't really like it when the beat ends and then it comes back and it's just the chorus going again and then the instrumental plays and then it's just over. I'm just like, oh, you could have just ended it there. 10 out of 10. But of course there's one song in particular that, you know, I can't help but talk about because it's just that amazing of a track, and that's none other than Runaway. Runaway being one of his greatest songs of all time, one of his most popular songs of all time. This song has one of those very, very few parts to it that you don't find in many other songs. And that being that you hear just one note of it and people lose their fucking minds. That one note is so powerful that you could just make everybody go crazy, because that song is just so amazing. Pusha T has an amazing feature, and then that second verse from Kanye after Pusha T's verse, that's my favorite part. And then he comes back into the hook, just, oh my gosh, so great. And this track is 9 minutes. It's 9 minutes of greatness. And of course, a year after that, you had one of the biggest collab albums of all time come out, being Jay-Z and Kanye West with Watch the Throne. While I think it's a little too late for that album, I feel like, to have came out, but at the same time, it's still, I feel like, a great project to listen to. Obviously great hits, Otis, that song being such a big song in its own, it spawned a bunch of memes of just the title, that one song, that song, it's just. And of course, I would say this is one of my favorite songs of all time. I'm probably gonna be repeating that throughout this whole video, but this is one of my favorite songs of all time, and I feel like you hear it a lot in movie trailers. But No Church in the Wild, ooh, it feels like you about to go on a run, about to do a heist or some shit. Those drums, it fills you up with so much dark energy. And then you got Frank Ocean on the hook, and he's just sounding so angelic. And then Jay-Z's verse is great, Kanye's verse is great. And one thing that I do like about the track, and it's kind of sucks that's not in the music video too, but the ending of the track being very calm at the very end of this giant storm that you just went through. It's a masterpiece. And then of course after that, there was a good amount of singles that did come out of the Cruel Summers era. Was it Cruel Summers? Was it Cruel Winter? I don't even remember. Out of all those singles really that he did release, I mean, the biggest one out of them all was Mercy. This is the kind of song when everybody in the group does their part in the project, and the beat is hard on its own. There's debates on who has the best verse on Mercy. Easily the most logical answer on here is 2 Chainz. And I do love how you go from Kanye's short verse and you go into, I guess, 2 Chainz's verse. That's one of the hardest parts to me. And then following that in 2013, you had probably his second most polarizing kind of project, sonically, of course, which this project also did leave a bit of mixed reviews, and it really gave people a bit of a cult following with this project, being none other than Yeezus. Yeezus having a lot of its experimental sounds that you do hear a lot in, I guess, today's music, if a matter of fact, and kind of gave birth, I feel like, to an artist like Travis Scott, who definitely had a big hand in this project as well. And I feel like this also being another case where in Dark Fantasy, I don't care that much for Yeezus, and yet I still return to a lot of songs on here. Bound 2, people who say is one of his best. On Sight is a meme. My favorite song, though, does have to go to New Slaves. Even though the beat is awkward, I like how awkward the beat is. And definitely, I think the biggest part through this song is actually Kanye's performance and how it starts really building up the intensity of the track. And much like with No Church in the Wild, there's a release afterwards where then the beat transitions in this heavenly instrumental, and you do get Kanye still distorting and auto-tuning his voice heavily. And then after that, you get Frank Ocean, who as well on this track does amazing on here. The only other song that I do kind of want to talk about is none other than Hold My Liquor, which this song is just, production wise, is phenomenal. My favorite part still is Chief Keef, a very young Chief Keef who for some reason sounds like Juice WRLD a little bit. And of course then that transition at the end of the song where the guitar just goes fucking crazy. And then as far as like after that, you know, he did also release some singles in the time being, which of course, you know, I talked about before, All Day being one of my favorite Kanye West songs, and I still listen to that song. It's still a banger. And then following that up into 2016 with The Life of Pablo. With The Life of Pablo, the way I feel about this project is very similar, I feel like, to how people respond to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And while, yes, this album doesn't feel nearly as grand as Dark Fantasy, I still have a whole lot of fun with this project, and to the point where this track list is damn near perfect. You know, I could argue part 2 of Father Stretch My Hands is probably the weakest song on the album, but that Listening Party is legendary. Great songs on here, whether that would be Wolves, Waves, you know, I Love Kanye, which, you know, which even though that's an interlude, just gave birth to one of the greatest memes. I just thought about what I love. By the way, I didn't mention this earlier, but the Netflix documentary on Kanye West is amazing. I would mainly just watch the first 2 episodes. The third one is, I don't think, as great, but the first 2 are amazing, just kind of mainly going through the process of the college dropout. But my favorite part from the third one is actually when they play Father Stretch My Hands, and then Ultralight Beam probably being my favorite track on the album. Like, this was something I feel like where he was really going into his gospel bag, and like, you don't gotta believe in God to listen to this song and just feel so uplifted with the Lord's Spirit. And the choir does an amazing job. The sample of the girl talking about praising Jesus in the beginning is great. And then, dude, you get like a top tier verse from Chance the Rapper. Chance the fucking Rapper. Remember Chance the Rapper? Dude, what a run that man had. As far as I recall, after that, you know, you did get one of the funniest diss tracks of all time, that being aimed at Drake with none other than Lift Yourself. Was supposed to be a beat that Kanye was supposed to give Drake, and Kanye was like, yeah, I'll give it to you, and then never sent it and just uploaded that song. And this song does actually have a special place in my heart, I won't lie. The reason why The Boys Watch is called The Boys Watch is just simply because, and it's kind of embarrassing, in high school we had a friend group that we titled The Boys of Whoop. So The Boys Watch is kind of in remembrance of that time period, and a remembrance of course, this song. The instrumental is great. And then he starts, you know, saying poopity scoop on there. I remember when my siblings were younger, and I'd play this song in the car. It would get to that part, and they'd laugh hysterically, and then they would go, no, run it back. And you play it again, laugh hysterically, and then ask you to run it back, and then again. It's like, you want to keep a kid entertained for hours, just play Lift Yourself. But yeah, after, now that I'm remembering, like, yeah, 2018 was actually kind of a big year for Kanye. He did drop, I would say, probably his most underrated album to this day, which is Ye. Probably my 3rd favorite Kanye West album of all time. This album, I do appreciate how he really did kind of, you know, open up a little bit about what kind of is going on a little bit mentally. I feel like it could have been a little deeper into his subject matter, which I think he did a little bit better on another project, which I'll get into. A track like Yikes is still a banger to this day. Ghost Town is just so uplifting, but my favorite track on here is Violent Crimes. I can only imagine when I'm older, and, you know, if I have a daughter, that if I play this song, I know I'm gonna feel a bit of a different way. And ironically, like a week after Ye came out, him and Kid Cudi came out with a phenomenal collab project, Kids See Ghosts, which to this day, it is still my favorite Kanye West project. I mainly just love how uplifting this album does feel. Cudi Montage, that's a great closer. Free is a great song. Reborn being the biggest case of like your soul just feels uplifted, but at the same time there's some bangers on there. But my favorite track on here does have to be the title track, Kids See Ghosts, which I mainly discovered this song through the little remix, I guess, that Tyler the Creator had posted on YouTube. I love the beat. I don't remember who else is on the song outside of Kid Cudi and Kanye, but I think they both do a great job, and that beat is just still really hard to this day. And then after that, Kanye really switched his gear up a bit. He wanted to go full gospel, became a Christian, which I don't even know if that was real. At this point, I don't really know what is real. And I don't recall if I brought this up when I brought up Hurry Up Tomorrow in the last video. He had a gift that I feel like a lot of artists that are popular don't really have. You know, I think there's only a handful of big artists that really have this gift, but it's the gift where they are at really the top of art. Like, they're at the very top of it all. And yet with each album that they release at this point, no matter what, there is a bunch of hits off of that, or just a hit off of that, and yet they always follow up each album with some sort of quality. And while at this point in time, yes, I will say that from what we've discussed so far, Jesus is King is his worst project, but yet at the same time, there is still some quality to it. You know, mainly in the track, you know, Closing on Sunday. But in reality, yes, I do believe that there is some quality, even though I do agree this is one of his worst projects. I merely kind of see this album more as a stepping stone, and him kind of trying to make the whole gospel Christian album kind of work. And yet while I don't feel like it was as successful, you know, he did go on later to refine that. Use This Gospel being, I think, probably the best song on the project, where, you know, you do, much like with Runaway, you do have just that piano. You really have just one note kind of playing throughout most of it. And I love those vocals kind of coming in, almost acting a little bit like the bass. And I'm really not a fan of the whole Dr. Dre Eminem remix that they did for Use This Gospel on whatever the DJ Khaled album was. He did later go on to refine this gospel Christian sound with his 2021 project Donda. And even though this is kind of recent, you know, this still just I feel kind of nostalgic for it. It was a great rollout with, you know, the multiple different cover arts that did come out, or whether if that would be even just the listening parties in particular, were like, you were just on the edge of your seat on if this album was even going to come out or not, or even like what versions of songs were even going to come out. You know, despite how long this project is, and how bloated it still does feel to this day, I think this album is still really great. And this album has amazing songs, whether if that would be Jail, whether if that would be God Breathed, whether if that would be Believe What I Say, whether if that would be Pure Souls with Roddy Ricch. What a great song. Off the Grid was such a big hit at the time. Hurricane, which was also a great song. And then there was also the Deluxe, which I'm not a fan of the track placement on the Deluxe. But I mean, even then there were some great songs on there, like Never Abandon Your Family, and one other track that I will get into later. But my favorite song on here does have to go to Moon. I love Don Toliver's vocals, and like I said with Kids See Ghosts and how uplifting that song or that album really felt, this song feels like it could have fit real well on Kids See Ghosts, and at the same time, it fits perfectly on Donda. Kid Cudi is amazing on this song, and even Kanye, even though he doesn't have a single verse, his added vocals on here is just, it's great, and it's heavenly. However, there is one song in particular that I do really want to talk about on here, and this being the biggest case where I feel like the Christian gospel sound that he was going for really worked for him on this album. And that would be none other than Come to Life. This song being one of the very few songs I would say that I've actually cried to. You know, I'm not gonna go too deep into the story or whatnot, but a little quick story. Just at the time I was going through a little bit mentally, and I remember I went to I think it was my grandparents' house, and for some reason I was just given a box of dog cookies and like a little dog blanket. I was just told, hey, you can bring this on over to your dog. When I left, I just, for some reason, I wanted to take a little bit of the longer road home. So I stop at an intersection. The light was red. I look over to my left and I see that there was this homeless guy. He was sitting there and he had a dog. And the dog was just laying there. I rolled the window down and I asked, like, hey, do you want this blanket and this, you know, box of cookies? He just was like, oh yeah, for real, man, like that'd be great, like I appreciate that. And I gave it to him, and then it just hit me when he took the blanket and he just laid it on his dog that was just laying there, and the light turned green. I drive off, and then I hear this song come on, and I broke down into tears. Just like everything that I was thinking at that time, I was like, that's complete bullshit, because I wouldn't have done that. And then to kind of, I guess, wrap up this whole video, the last song that I do want to talk about is a pretty important song, I feel like, to Kanye's discography. A pretty important song to Donda, and that'd be none other than Life of the Party. And for one, you got to give Andree 3000 his props, not just because this is, I would say, his greatest feature ever, one of his greatest verses ever, but he stood on business, and he said that if you're gonna release this song with me on it, you got to release an explicit version. And thank goodness for the explicit version, because it actually does add quite a bit to the song. This, I would say, is probably my second favorite song of all time, if I had to be honest with you. I briefly kind of mentioned Mac Miller's Circles. It changed my perception of like death a little bit, and when I listened to that project. And this song is kind of the same way, except I would say it's more of a mixture of like death and life, as in you kind of have to take every moment and hold on to it, you know, be grateful for everything. And especially with the verses from both Kanye and Andree, even when Andree is talking about, I guess he's kind of like almost writing a letter to Donda, talking about like if he can, or if she can see, you know, his mom, you know, up there, you know, ask him all these questions that he has for her. And then once you get to the end, and even this being sad, or this being released around the time DMX had passed, and the very end when you get DMX, the little theme park ride with his kid, like that really hit home. And I won't even say it was just the last two songs that got me feeling this way, but like I'm kind of depressed now. I'm like depressed now just talking about all this. I wish he wasn't on the bullshit that he's on, but I mean, low key, it makes me sad. Yeah, obviously I'm not going to be going into when he was trying to release Donda 2, or even just his shit on Vultures 1 or 2. I'm not going to go into that. I'll probably check out Bully when that comes out. I'm not looking forward to it anymore, to be honest. I mean, at the end of the day, this man just doesn't care. We're never going to get a Kanye West that releases something like Life of the Party or We Major or Runaway ever again. And
what the hell?